Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SHEMAKERS Live. I am Shavonna Williams, your hostess and the founder and CEO of Heels and Helmets. This is the place where we have conversations to help women develop their playbooks to win in business and life. Throughout my career of more than 2 decades, I have worked in a lot of different areas in marketing and communications, including business, politics, government, and sports. 5 major sports leagues. Yes, I am a veteran in this game. So you can imagine, I've been in a lot of boardrooms where I was the only woman, and I'm working to change that. My goal is to get more women in the boardroom with equal pay. Throughout my career, I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of incredible men and women who are not only talented and killing the game, but share my passion to empower women and help you succeed. That's what this conversation is all about. I want you to get the tools to navigate business, understand how you can advocate for yourself and impact change, managing family and career, and have other discussions around issues that impact women. Thank you for joining me for tonight's episode. What is exactly a SHEMAKER? Well, a SHEMAKER is anyone who is talented and uses their resources to help women succeed. You are a SHEMAKER, and I am here to help you unleash your power, make big plays, get in the end zone, and win. Tonight's SHEMAKER is Shelly Kovacs, and I'm so excited to have Shelly join us for tonight's conversation. Shelly Kovacs was my college academic advisor, so I've known her for, let's just say, a long time now. After her 30-year career at the University of Michigan, she started her own company, Kovacs Connections College Transition Coaching. She is an author, consultant, and public speaker. With over 3 decades of experience in higher educational administration and fundraising, her areas of expertise include academic success and motivation at the high school, college, and professional levels. She has a lot of experience working with student athletes as well as coaches. Her book, College Knowledge for the Student Athlete, has been widely acclaimed by former athletes, coaches, teachers, parents, and administrators. She based that work on her years of experience working with college and high school athletes. Shelly now spends her time not only working with students, but anyone who is ready to make a transition and reach their maximum potential. So tonight, everyone, please welcome our SHEMAKER coach, Shelly Kovacs. And actually, since she is my college academic advisor, please put a note in the comments and not only tell me where you're watching from, but your alma mater or your favorite college football team. Again, everyone, please welcome Shelly Kovacs. Well, hello there.
Hi there. Thank you for that introduction. The only thing that made me feel old is when you said you feel old.
I'm telling on myself. Like, it was one thing when I could say, oh, I'm still in touch with my college advisor 5 years later, but now it's like, woo, I'm about to hit that quarter century mark. I cannot believe it.
Yes, well, my favorite mantra is be the age you would be if you didn't know how old you really were. So that's worked for me. I'm sure it will work for you too.
Well, yes, I will have to use that one. I definitely, still feel like I should be walking around Ann Arbor where we first met.
Right?
Yeah. And speaking of that, Shelly, to get started, I want to share a story and then ask you a question. When you and I first met, I had just transferred to the Kinesiology department after being in LS&A. And at the time, you had just taken on, I guess, some new students and reached out because you noticed that I had missed a couple of classes. And looking at my record, you saw that that was not like me at all. And I have to confess, when we did meet and started talking about it, I was ready to be regular Shavonna, game face, talk about my plan, move forward, and not get into what was really going on. Any other advisor, I would have been able to say, yes, I've missed a few classes, but I am going to make up my work and move forward. And of course, we'll have a great semester. You kept probing. And finally, I said, I have a tumor. and I'm nervous. And I have been back and forth to the doctor, and we don't know what the next steps are going to be like at this point. And that is what kicked off our relationship. I recall you connected me, well, sharing your story, and then connected me with Dr. Helen Pass, who eventually conducted my surgery. Everything was benign and I was fine, but it was that conversation that really started our relationship, which goes beyond you just being an academic advisor. So my question is, so my question is, how were you able to really be proactive with your students and identify areas that could have been a concern to help them mitigate whatever they were facing and continue to be successful? Because as I said, yes, I was at a point where I did have some health issues going on and was very concerned, but strong work ethic, I was going to make up for that time and bounce back. Not all students would have.
Right. So that gives me, the opportunity to talk about two pieces of my own philosophy that have really guided me through all of my work. And at the time, I'm not even sure I was an assistant director yet. I might have still been an advisor. And as I progressed, up through the ranks to become an assistant director and then a director of the entire academic affairs operation, I really insisted that my staff follow the same philosophy. And there are two pieces to it. The first is it's very easy to be a bad advisor. You just don't ask the questions that you really want to know the answers to. Yeah. And it's very, how many times does somebody say to you, how are you doing? And the answer is fine. Most people will let it go with that. Mm-hmm. And there's always a lot more behind it. So it's a matter of asking the next question. Why are you fine? Tell me what's fine. What does that mean? And being able to really, ask the next question. That's a piece of it, is not letting it go at face value. Because the reality is that nothing exists in a vacuum. So whether it's school or work or whatever it is that you're dealing with, it's just one piece of the puzzle of what constitutes your life. Yeah. The other piece is you never know what happened to somebody right before they walked in your door. So every conversation has the potential to be a life-changing conversation. In your case, clearly it was. Maybe 8 out of 10 conversations in a day are not necessarily, but I firmly believed, and as I said, really trained my staff and expected that of my staff, that they really believe and operate, and I still do to this day, with the firm belief that you never know what somebody's dealing with at the same time that you're interacting with them. And I think it's kind of the quintessential essence of respecting another person, is to really be as open to what might be going on. If somebody is rude or snippy or whatever, maybe doesn't feel well, you just always have to believe that the conversation you're going to have with them could have much bigger implications and a far bigger impact than it seems on the face of it.
It was incredible to me that you were even paying attention. I was like, it was 2 classes and it wasn't even the same class. It was 2 classes.
Well, I'm also a very firm believer in nipping it in the bud.
Right.
And I worked with enough students that developing a bad habit in college, getting behind in a class, is much harder. It's a downward spiral.
Yes.
So I really was committed to trying to prevent that from happening.
Yes, that is so true. It's so funny to laugh at now But I, certainly at the time was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting this call and I've only missed 2 classes and it was a different class. Like, it's not high school.
Right. Well, the other thing is,
So
I think
grateful to
coming,
have that type of support, to have someone, care and be concerned. And like you said, want to nip it in above. And I always share that story when people ask me about attending a large university.
that's what I was going to say. For you, it probably even was more bizarre because you had just transferred from LSNA, where you probably never talked to an advisor. Probably nobody knew your name. And it's really in some ways, it's wonderful. Kinesiology now has been a school for many, many years, and they have almost 1,000 students now.
Mhm.
Back in the day that you are talking about, there were probably maybe 400 undergrads.
Yeah.
And it's when you get bigger, you can't help but lose some of that. You just can't
Right.
maintain the same level. Although, as I was retiring, that's something I wrote the dean kind of these are my wishes, upon my leaving. And one of the things I said, because at that point there were probably about 800 students, probably closer to 7. And I said, don't lose what made us so special when we were small. Whatever you have to do to maintain that level of service and the culture that existed for students when it was a smaller school within a large university, I think really made an incredible difference for the students who experienced it.
Where did that commitment and passion come from?
That's a good question. I think I was lucky enough to find my calling. I mean, I found it indirectly. It was just like most other people. It was not a straight path. Yeah, I don't even know if you know this about me, but I was working with ex-offenders in a methadone maintenance clinic, and I had worked with a lot of ex-offenders. I worked in drug rehab. I was really working on the not the college side of things. And my grad program was a great program that doesn't exist anymore, but it was a combination of a clinical license and higher ed administration. And I thought that I was really just going to continue, reforming the justice system, rehabbing people that going the social justice route. And a friend of mine's mother was sick, and she had committed to an internship for a year in the School of Education. And she wanted to go home in January and take a semester off, but felt, really compromised by leaving the internship. So she asked me if she knew that my internship was over in December, and she knew that I was just planning to do coursework the following semester, and it was my last semester, and I only had, I can't remember, 2 or 3 classes. So she asked me if I would take over her internship so she could go home and take care of her mom. So how could I say no to that? Plus, it was right on campus, it was, literally. So I did, and when it was spring break time and I went out looking for my first job with my graduate degree, it was not a great job market. And I came back, and the director then knew that I was going to be looking for a job. And he said, "Did you find anything?" And I, sheepishly said, "No, it's not a great time." And he said, "Well, why don't you want to work here?" And I said, "Well, I think this is kind of like too vanilla for me. It's like not what I really wanted to do, much more challenging, much more difficult things." And he said, "Well, first of all, I think you don't really have a good sense of what it is because you were only an intern and you were not involved in the whole operation. And and the woman who was my supervisor was the person who was leaving. So he told me, he said, I'll make you a deal. If you are not happy with this job in 6 months, I will give you work release and staff support to find another job. That's how sure I am that you're going to like this." And here I am. Never looked back.
What did you like about it initially?
I think and still to this day, I mean, I'm teaching, I'm still working with, individual clients, I'm working with elite sport camps, and I'm working with a lot of parents. And what I love is exactly what you described about our relationship, is being able to help people find whatever it is that's going to enable them to succeed, whatever, helping them find what speaks to them or helping them resolve the goal, just, really that one-on-one. Somebody approached me once about franchising my business because I worked with his daughter and he was in the franchise world, and he thought, boy, this is great. I could franchise this all over the country, blah, blah, blah. And I actually, thought about it a little bit, and I realized, when I said to him, you know what, I don't think it can be franchised because I can't clone myself.
Right.
And to me, what's special about what I do is exactly that, one-on-one that I'm able to develop with people.
And now that you have your own business, how do you approach that work? What's the model?
I think in very much the same way as I did when I was doing it for the university. Still really trying to meet people where they are and assess where they want to go and what's preventing that from happening, and trying to understand that piece. An interesting thing that I've learned over time is that most people don't have somebody in their lives that just really listens to them. And I think that's one of the things that my clients now, my students in the past, feel really motivated to work with me and to get to the next level, is because they know that I'm really hearing them and I'm really committed to them reaching their goal.
I think it is innate for you, Shelly, but in starting that relationship with a new client, walk us through what that conversation is about to, one, demonstrate that you are listening and help guide them to where they want to be. How do you pull that out?
But it's actually kind of counterintuitive. The initial conversation is always me saying, starting out with, can we play 20 questions? Just humor me. And the first thing we're going to do is play 20 questions. And I'm going to ask the questions that I think I need answers to, to be able to start assessing what's going on, how I can help, what the client is struggling with, or what specifically they're looking for me to help with. So I have to build the scenario in my mind before I can come up with a plan. So it's much more, me just going, and it's different. Obviously, it's never the same 20 questions. It's different for every person. But I find that helps me get immediately, to zero in on whatever it is that I think I need to know. And obviously, the client doesn't have the same idea of what I need to know as I would have. So I think sometimes people are interested in what the questions are. For example, one of the things that I always ask is, tell me about your siblings. Where are you in the birth order? And that tells me a lot. Look at your own family. You can, if somebody understood that about you or not, it says a lot about how that person will understand you.
Definitely. Along those lines, what kind of advice do you have for parents who are preparing for their children to leave for college? I think that there's learning on both sides, especially with the first child and just letting go.
So true. So very true. one of the really important things I tell parents, and this is generationally, we talk about the helicopter parents who want to swoop down and save their kids from experiencing any adversity. And the helicopter parents progressed to the point where we called them the snowplow parents. They weren't even up here. They were right here, at ground level. So the best advice I always give to parents is to let their kids be independent while they're still living at home. Let them practice being independent. Get them a bank account. Teach them how to use a debit card or a charge card or a credit card. Let them learn how to do their own laundry, how to cook. They don't have to become expert chefs, but what I would consider to be basic life skills. The hardest thing about dealing with parents, and this is a realistic situation, is that parents feel the stakes are so high that they are afraid to let their kids fail. And because this starts at a very early age, kids need to develop that, as you put it when we were talking earlier, failing forward piece. And there are several social psychologists who have done a fabulous job writing about this. Angela Duckworth has a book called Grit. And then she even came out with a parent's handbook. Oh, so wow. I would actually buy 10 copies of that handbook, and then I would give it to to the clients of my parents that I felt, I'm sorry, I said that backwards, to the parents of my clients that really needed to understand how they were hurting their kids by not allowing them to fail and learn the perseverance and learn not to fear rejection and not to fall down when something bad happens. I want to share something that I was told by somebody I met who was a POW in the Vietnam War for 8 years. And we were talking about how he managed to stay alert and how he got through 8 years in an 8x6 cell. And his answer was a sentence that has really stuck with me since I met him probably 8 years ago or so. And he said, adversity is a terrible thing to waste. And during COVID, I can't tell you how many times I shared that with people. But my neighbors whose kids were high school seniors, and they were so upset that they were going to miss prom or that they didn't have this opportunity or that opportunity, and the parents of my clients that were high school freshmen who wouldn't have a typical college first year, or my clients that were college graduates that were not going to be able to have, that special graduation weekend. And I would say the same thing. Adversity is a terrible thing to waste. Don't get so caught up in what you're missing that you lose the ability to gain strength from it.
I was recently listening to a conversation with former First Lady Michelle Obama and Tracy Ellis Ross. And Michelle shared that she has found that boys are taught to fail forward and get back up. And there's a lot of pressure on girls to be perfect. In your work advising students and working in academia, have you seen that?
I have. I think that there's also a part of that that's related to athletics. I think if the girl has participated in sports, she's more used to criticism. She's more used to not achieving a goal on a regular basis. And I think that's where boys get that kind of a training. So yes, I have seen it a lot, but I think that we're seeing it less and less as girls have become more and more actively involved in sports.
So funny. It's so funny you say that. I joke about that in relation to myself. I'm like, had I continued to play sports, I probably would not be the recovering perfectionist that I am.
That's right, because you would be used to being yelled at. Not that all coaches yell, but I can't say I've met many that haven't, you know. And you would be used to getting criticized constructively and otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be used to
losing.
Yeah.
Just flat out.
Right.
There's not one single athlete who has won every single game since 5 years old or made every single shot.
That's right.
With that, I would like to transition a little bit and talk about women and women in the workplace and applying for opportunities. I remember in one of our conversations, you were on a panel and you mentioned that women do not apply for opportunities that they do not feel like they have accomplished or they have mastered every single thing on the job description. And they often feel like they have to go back to school to get more education. And we do not see that with our male counterparts.
Yes, I still believe that. I can't believe you remember that. It must have really stuck with you.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I made a big point about that. And that's one of the things, I think part of the reason that my client base has grown in the area of working with work transition clients, regardless of where they are, is because I've acquired somewhat of a reputation for taking your skills forward and not assuming that people have to go back to school or get different training or get certain credentials. Sometimes you do, but I think what we've seen too much with women is that they feel they have to be perfectly ready and qualified for a position to apply for it. And men don't have that same obstacle, that mental obstacle. I'm not saying that people should apply for jobs they're not qualified for, but I think that women tend to think, oh, before I apply for a job like this one, I should have 3 years experience doing this, even if it's a natural transition from the job that they're currently in.
Natural transition and being qualified, but not seeing themselves as qualified, I think is your point.
Right. Right. What constitutes qualified?
Exactly. I mean, it may say need 8 years of experience, but perhaps you do not have the 8 years, but you've done it in an environment that would feel like 8 years.
Right, right. And
Or
you've had the
you have-
challenges. Right. So what would be the reason that somebody would want 8 years? Because they would want to make sure that you've had the exposure and the experience of many different scenarios, good times, bad times, whatever the cycle is. And I think, to your point, that it's possible to acquire that in less than 8 years, depending on what your specific circumstances are. So again, learning, you said this in the very beginning of the podcast, learning how to advocate for yourself, learning how to view your own capabilities and your own skills, and learning how they translate. What about you makes you particularly skillful in a job that may be very different from the job in which you are currently in, but you could be equally as successful.
And how did you learn those lessons, Shelly?
How did I learn those lessons? So I'm kind of an enigma because this is a secret, so nobody watching this can ever tell anybody. I never applied for a job. Every job I ever got, I was recruited for, or by the person who wanted to hire me. So I never actually had to prove that I was qualified to do that job. But let me explain something. I'm working with somebody right now who wants to, as she put it, do what I did within higher education. And I was explaining to her that to do what I did in this market, in this world today, that she really needed to have a PhD. And she said, but you didn't. And I said, well, that's true, but it's because I was being hired by people who were working with me. But today, to be hired for a job at that level, unless you were in that same situation, and even then, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that there were 8 positions like mine on campus, and every single person except me had a PhD. So if I knew that my career trajectory was going to be what it ended up to be, the question is, would I have gotten a PhD? And the answer is, I would have. But in my situation, as it turned out, I was able to reach that level without it. So maybe that's part of the reason that I am very quick to tell people, don't automatically assume you need a certain credential or a certain degree or you need to go back to school.
I think it's also about understanding how you get that experience and education without the formal credential.
Exactly. So much about life experience. And a lot of the work that I did that I'm still doing actually with athletes, is the transferable skill piece. Typically, college athletes do not have the opportunity to do internships the way non-athletes do. And so working with their resumes or talking about interview prep, one of the important exercises, and there's a whole chapter about this in my book, is what are transferable skills? What do athletes learn by virtue of being athletes? There are a couple of companies I know that aggressively recruit athletes because they want people that are driven, motivated, coachable, really kind of, go-getters. And I was a student had used me for reference a couple of weeks ago for a company that is a software platform company, and this woman happened to have been a swimmer at U of M, and I was starting to tell her about all of starting to discuss this piece about, because she was an athlete, blah blah blah. And the woman said to me, oh, you don't have to tell me that. I was a college athlete and I know that, and I only hire college athletes.
Interesting. What are some of the other unique challenges that student athletes face?
Time. Time is, if you look at some of the life in a day of, swimmers would have 2 practices in a day. They would get up and at 5 in the morning and go swim, and they're not the only ones. A lot of the different sports that are in that use pools, or that, baseball, for example, crosses over into almost every semester. I used to tease my football guys that they were the biggest wimps on campus. How many games did they have? They had a total of maybe 12 games. Now the Big Ten has 12 teams and they all play non-conference, so there might be a little more. But if you look at the amount of competition that basketball or baseball or many of the other sports do in comparison to football, it's unbelievable. And I have so much respect for athletes that are able to maintain good grades while they're competing, because it is so not easy. And for probably the last at least 20 years, probably even more, being a college athlete is a 12-month-a-year sport, at least in a Division I program, in a competitive or a Division I program. Obviously, not so much in Division II, and even less so in Division III. But for Division I athletes, it's really a 12-month commitment.
Was that the reason why you had to write your book?
So the story about how I wrote that book is actually, of course, there's a story, right?
Of course.
So my friend, you'll notice there's two names on the book. David Schoem's name is on the book too. David Schoem is my friend who I'd worked with many ventures over many years. We had done a lot of work together, and he wrote a general book called College Knowledge. And he asked me to be one of his peer editors. When he called me, I said, David, you stole my title. For like 15 years before that, I had told my husband I was going to write a book called College Knowledge one day. So I said, you stole my topic, you stole my title. If you still want me to be a peer reviewer, I'm willing to do it, but just so you know, that's what I'm coming in with. So he laughed and he said, yes, I definitely want you to do it. So I said, I read the manuscript and I said, okay, this is a book for upper white, middle class kids with two parents who went to college, period. This is who this book speaks to. It does not speak to most of the clients or, most of the students that I work with. But, for the upper white middle class, two parents who went to college that are professionals, you go, So I said to him, in fact, this book could be a really great book for niche markets. You could do one for students with disabilities, for transfer students, for pre-med students, for athletes. I think athletes was the first one I said when I mentioned it to him. For community college students, for graduate students. He told the publisher what I said, and the publisher loved the idea and asked David who at Michigan would be the best person to write an athlete version, and who at Michigan would be the best person to write a disabilities version, and who the best person at Michigan would be to write a transfer student version. Well, when David answered Shelly Kovacs to all three questions, the publisher called me and said, okay, we think that the athlete book should be written first, so we would like you to write this book, and then if you want to write the other books, you can.
Oh, wow. So yours came first?
So that's how it happened. And the hardest thing about writing a book that anybody will tell you is getting a publisher. And lucky for me, I had the publisher come to me and say, will you write this book? So that was right. So David's name is that. So there is a series. There are 5, maybe 6 books now. And I was asked to write 2 of the other ones. I graciously declined because writing that book was like my 3rd child. And yeah, it took about 2 years, and I loved doing it. I loved every second of it. And the books follow similar format to David's. And David actually said to the other authors, you can use whatever of his material that you want. And I used almost nothing, but most of the other authors did use a lot of the material that he had written.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I will say that the publisher, I thought I was going to have to write a high school edition, but the publisher has been really great. They own the rights to the book. That's the advantage of self-publishing. Mm-hmm. But because they see the work that I'm doing, they're very flexible with me about being able to reprint parts of the book or use certain parts and then mix it up with other stuff. So given that they've afforded me that flexibility, I decided I definitely don't need to write another version.
You can use that. Maybe a workbook to complement for some of your clients.
I am working on something like that, actually.
I could also see a book catered toward your clients who are adults and transitioning, whether it's moms returning to the workforce after staying at home with children.
Right. I became the go-to person for my friend group because I was the only one of my friends that continued working when my kids were babies. I never really planned to do that. It just sort of happened. I really loved my job. And when I was gonna when I took a leave, if I wanted to take a longer leave than the typical maternity leave, at that point, the university had to give you back a job, but they didn't have to give you back your job. So I was able to develop really flexible situations with. It was two different deans I was dealing with, actually, and when all my friends who stopped working during the time that they were having kids and their kids were babies, when they decided to go back to work, they, one by one, all came to see me, and I did a great job with all of them. One of them actually even became an associate provost at Michigan State.
Really?
Yeah, she's my best success story.
Nice. Well, I was going to say, hearing you talk about loving your job and not seeing yourself leaving your work and starting your family, how did you approach motherhood?
That was very challenging. My husband was he was an associate in a law firm when our kids were born. He was not yet a partner, so people who know what that means. I mean, he was never available, and we pretty quickly discovered how important our childcare was. And there was a point at which, when I had two kids, our kids are 2 years apart, and there was a point at which we were paying more in childcare than I was earning, and we just decided that we made a choice that that's what was important to me. I loved what I was doing, and as long as we had a good childcare situation, I really felt that the kids were benefiting. I would not have been a great stay-at-home mom. And you know what? The reality is, this is not true for all stay-at-home moms, but so many of the people that I knew didn't have any more quality, or I don't want to say any more, but didn't have much more quality time with their kids than I did. I think when you work and you have kids, you really prioritize the quality of time that you have. So, for example, one of the things I did pretty early on was, when I think this was even, when our first child was born, I wanted to have somebody coming into the house, and I felt that was the best way to go. We both did. And by the time he got old enough to start preschool, our youngest was born. So I had somebody there, all the, Monday through Friday, all the time. And then she would, when the youngest went to preschool, the preschool actually hired my nanny. And then, it was a half a day, so she would bring my daughter home. But, you adapt to the situation. I think if you're able to look at what's working and what's not and what you need, and if you're lucky enough to be able to afford to make those adjustments, not everybody has that opportunity. But, as I said, there were, probably 2 or 3 years that I worked just to maintain the opportunities that I had, because the daycare that we chose with having somebody in the house all the time was more expensive than if the kids were at a daycare where we took them. But the point I was going to make is that I realized that if I came home at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, that was the witching hour, and all I was doing was stressed, trying to make dinner, trying to feed them, trying to do baths. And at some point, I pretty quickly realized that I should come home at 7 and let the nanny do all of that. And then when I came home, they were fed, they were happy, they were bathed. All we did was play until it was bedtime. And, that took me a while, not a long while, a pretty short while. But once I figured that out, it was much better. And initially, I said, when I was the parent of my first child, maybe even my second, oh, I only want you to take care of the baby. I don't want you to, do any laundry or anything. I just want you 100% focused on the baby. Well, that worked for a couple of weeks until I realized that the time that I had with my kids, then I was the one that was doing the laundry. So then I said, okay, while the babies are sleeping or whatever's going on, one's in preschool, the other one's napping, these are the things that I want you to do, and that included laundry. Even when my kids got older, I never wanted them to be home alone after school. So even until my youngest was about in 11th grade, I still had somebody here that they knew. There was a lot of carpooling that was going on, and our nanny would always do the driving their part, and then I would always do the picking up part. So yeah, it is a challenge. One time when my son was 3 months old, I took him actually to a meeting in Fleming, which is, where the president's office is. It was with the vice president for student services. And I called in the morning. My nanny was sick, and I called and I said, so I can either not come to this meeting, or I can come to this meeting and bring my 6-month-old son. And she said, well, let me check with blah, blah, whoever. And she said, you can bring him. So I brought him to the meeting. Fortunately, he was very good. I think that sort of thing is not as shocking. It's much more commonplace today, especially after COVID. But my son is almost 40. So at that time, it was pretty earth-shattering to say, well, if I'm coming to this meeting, I'm bringing my 6-month-old.
Well, that may be more common. There are some things that are still not very common. Talk to us about just developing the courage to speak up and advocate for the things you need to be successful.
To be successful as a working mother or as a professional?
In general, as a professional and working mother.
Okay, so one of the things that I think really motivated me to be the mentor that I am to people is that I only once in my career feel like I had a good mentor. I had one good mentor very early in my career, and it was the person I talked about earlier, who said to me, if you're not happy with this job in 6 months, I'll give you work release time and staff support to go find another job. I cannot stress enough the importance of having good mentors, and so much so that when given a choice in opportunities, whether it's a job or a class, I always tell people, go with the person that you think is the better fit for you. And I always have said, regarding classes, take the class with the best teacher, even if it's not necessarily a subject that you might take a class in. What you will learn from somebody who has such a great reputation as being a wonderful teacher is going to be extremely useful to you. And I learned on my own professionally, I have to say I probably had a number of missteps because I really was lacking that person that I could really talk to about what was good in my career and what would be. And I'll one of the examples that comes, right, that is right there with me to this day is when my second kid was born. I decided to reduce my appointment by 20%. And that was a big mistake. I should have just said that I wanted to take one day off a week. And when I ran out of, vacation time or whatever, that I would take time off without pay. Because what I did is I affected everything else. I affected my base salary, I affected my benefits. And then when I was going back to 20%, the dean, that was the point at which I became involved in fundraising and development. He wanted me to come back 20% in development, which was great. The reason he wanted me to is because I was supporting the person who was doing it so much that it was clear to him that I knew more than she did about fundraising. But then I found out he was just going to match what my 100% was, which was less than what this woman was getting paid for the development. Proportionally, my 20% would have been less than what she was making. So even though I wanted to do the work, I had that difficult conversation with him, and I said, I'm not going to do it unless you're going to pay me the same thing for that part of my work. And he said, I just don't have it. It's not in my budget. So you have to decide if you want to do it or not. And if you don't want to do it, you have to tell me. This was on a Friday. And he said, I need to know by Monday if you're going to do it or not. And I remember hanging up the phone thinking, what did I just do? And I decided to do it because I really wanted to do the work, and I thought it would be good for me to diversify professionally. And I never got the financial benefit, plus the fact that I had reduced my appointment by 20% for 3 years. I never regained, what I lost by doing that. So, sometimes you have the courage to advocate for yourself and it doesn't get you anything, but I at least felt proud of myself for doing it. And it's a great question. Where do you find the courage? How do you know to do it? I think there's much more information available today to people that are that age, and not only at the start of their career, but even with career changers or people that are not even changing careers, but just really being able to forward that. Just the mentality, I think, is much different than it was, for me 30 years ago. And I would encourage people not to shy away from advocating, because you will feel better, as I did, by doing it, even if it doesn't get you exactly what you want. I think there's an important degree of empowerment that goes along with saying, I said it, I asked, I made the case, and then being able to look at what the decision is, and then I still personally made the choice to do that. And I don't know what he would have said. He could have said, then you can't go back 100%. This is what I want you to do, and you don't want to do it, so you're stuck with your 80%.
Thank you for sharing. There are a lot of comments about other women feeling like, wow, that idea to ask for a reduction in employment by 20%, something that they had not considered. And just going back to work in general um, is a difficult like conversation and topic to have. Going into work, of course, there is this perception that women are not going to, stay long, or when they come back from maternity leave, they will be gone. So thank you, for sharing your experience there.
Can I add one more thing?
Please.
So this has to do with the challenge of being a working mother and the guilt. And one of the things that I really always did, especially as my kids got older, was to make sure that they understood what I was doing and why I was doing it. So to really, I don't know that I'd use the word engage, but to help them understand why I felt that my work was important to me and how it benefited the students that I worked with. And I would come home and tell them stories about what happened at me at work today, just like they would tell me what happened at school today. And if I helped somebody, I would tell them about it. And I really felt it was important for them to get that understanding. And the way that I knew that that really happened is when my son was very serious with someone and they broke up. I mean, they'd been together probably 2 years or so, and we really thought she was going to be the one for him. And when we found out that they broke up, or that he was breaking, I guess we found out after the fact, and I asked him what happened, and he said that he realized it took him a long time to figure out what it was, but he realized finally that it bothered him that she wasn't motivated to do anything beyond her 9 to 5 job. And she didn't see it she saw it as a paycheck. She enjoyed it enough to do it, but she didn't have that mentality that he was so used to from the way we try to expose our kids to, the working, life outside of being a working parent. And when he said that, when he explained that to us, I felt that we really did a good thing for our kids by helping them understand that you make a contribution to not only the person that you're working with, but to making the world a better place.
Well, I know you did a good job, because in the environment that you have been in as an academic advisor, you are a second mom, surrogate mom, adopted mom to so many students. I call you my Michigan mom. And amongst us, we joke about being the favorite. And you made us all feel like we were the favorite child. And your children, I feel like, look at us as siblings. There is not this animosity that my mother, spent so much time with her work, especially working with so many student athletes. But, like I said, we are like family, an extended family. So I know that you definitely shared with them the work, and they realized that it was important. And I think they appreciated supporting you in something that you were really passionate about, and they enjoyed it as well.
Thank you. I really feel that way. I do. Yeah. You're always my favorite.
I'm so glad to have this on camera.
Yeah, I hope your sister's not watching.
Well, Shelly, we have so many questions just around the college recruiting process. So instead of, just sharing all of these questions, can you just give us, macro level things that students should be doing to prepare to get into top university like our beloved University of Michigan?
Yes. The most important piece of information I think that I would share is that it's not about any one individual part. It really is all the pieces of the puzzle. And if I'm working with a 10th grader, for example, where there's still time to figure out what they need to do, we can cover that whole gamut. But if I'm working with a senior just on their applications, for example, and their essays, it's really important to think about all of the pieces and how they fit together. So what somebody decides to write in an essay, the topic is critical. It's not just how they write it, it's what they write about. And the most important advice that I give to my high schoolers in terms of developing academic success, there's two pieces to this. One is learn how to use a planner, and that a planner is not a calendar. The difference between a planner and a calendar is on a calendar, X marks the spot, and a planner teaches you and guides you how to go from point A to point B. If you have a test on June 10th, what do you do between today and June 10th to be game day ready on June 10th? And the way I help students learn to plan is to go backwards. So you're game day ready on June 10th. What do you do on June 9th? Mm-hmm. Going backwards is a very useful way to plan it. The other piece for developing academic success in high school is nobody ever really teaches you how to study. So people will say, teachers and parents will say, do your homework, or, you have studying to do, don't you? Nobody ever describes how you do that. What does that mean? So I figured that out when I had kids that were saying, oh, but I studied, for 6 hours for that exam. I can't believe I didn't do better. And I had enough kids saying that to me about not only school exams, but standardized tests, SAT, ACT, that I started asking, well, what do you do? How did you study? What exactly did you do? So parents should have that conversation with their kids. And if the parents are not sure what the answers are, I would do some Google searching or talk to teachers that your kid has a good relationship with. But not enough kids understand time management and study skills. And then the application piece, which is obviously important.
Time management, that will, become a reoccurring theme. You need it every step of the way.
Yes.
And it changes, the way you have to manage time as a student versus a professional, and then growing in your career, managing a team. You still have to do different things, but the foundation is definitely being organized and managing your time well. I like what you said about starting with game day and working back.
Right, and it's an analogy I use all the time with athletes, and it works just as well with, most high school kids play at least one sport, or they do something that's fun, even if it's not something that they do in a league. But you don't do the same thing. You train differently from the first day of your season up until your first day of competition, and then you train differently during the season. So if you put it in that context, of course it makes sense. But nobody ever talks about that, which I don't get. I've done a lot of high school workshops for parents or PTO groups, or just trying to explain around how do you get into your number one choice of college, and what do you have to do in high school to have a profile that is as competitive as possible. The other piece of that, I also do a workshop that I started doing at U of M through orientation years ago, called College is Not Grade 13. Mm-hmm. And based on the fact that so many freshmen in college fall down in their grades because they don't realize the difference in college work from high school work. So the same thing they did in high school is not going to get them the same grade they got in college.
Shelly, it looks like you're in trouble.
Uh-oh. You know I love you too, sweetie.
You're so good at asking questions. What is one question you would ask yourself if you were me this evening?
This is one of my 3, huh?
No, it's not.
Oh, no. This is so hard. Okay. Okay, so what's one of the questions?
If you were interviewing yourself this evening, what's one of the questions you would ask?
How did you decide when it was time to leave U of M?
Oh, gosh. I guess I couldn't ask that because I don't feel like you've left.
So I left in terms of not being the director of academic affairs, right, and then started my own business. But the story there is that I always said I would know when it was time to leave because I wasn't having fun anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved what I did till the second I stopped doing it. And part of what made me realize that it was time is that I wanted to be Wayne Gretzky and not Brett Favre. I mean, I like the Wayne Gretzky model a lot better. And I also felt that it was a good time to have some new blood. I had been there long enough. I had done everything that I felt that I could or wanted to do. And I had to realize that I could still work with students because that was the part that I loved so much. Thinking about doing another year of the same, orientation, academic probation, all of the responsibilities that went into my work. I realized that I was getting a little stale and it would be a good time to have somebody else. And, like I said, I wanted to kind of, sail up.
Yeah, I like that model as well. Well, before we get to your 3 sentences to complete, I have a little surprise for you.
Uh-oh.
Hey, Shelly, it's Noel. How you doing? I wanted to thank you so much for all your support, not just in college, but over the years, but especially for the 4 years in college that helped me get that thing right back there that I consider to be one of the most important pieces of paper that I've earned in my entire life. Again, thank you for everything that you've done for me over the years.
Shelly, I just wanted to take the time to thank you for walking with me alongside me through my journey at the University of Michigan and taking the time to focus on a young man from New Orleans who had goals and dreams, and you were definitely a part of that. And even after graduating, just your support, and you've always been a fan of mine and a big supporter of mine. And your focus on people and their growth and development is something that has and always will be much needed. So thank you for being you. I miss you and hope to see you soon.
You are truly amazing.
Oh my gosh, that was so wonderful. And you know what the funny story is with both of them? I'm sure that I have their permission to share this, that James especially, I ended up having a disagreement with both of their parents. With Noel, it was his dad, and with James, it was his mom, because I was being, really kind of, holding them accountable and, cracking the whip about certain things. And, I got a call from Noel's dad and from James's mom, and we ended up all, being great friends, and they were, perfectly happy with the way I was handling things. But yeah, no, that was so special. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Really amazing. No,
Well, I only wanted to put up the year that they graduated and let you boast on your success stories of managing partner of a law firm, and former NFL football player, philanthropist, all from Shellys tree.
thank you. That was great.
Okay, let's get to the fun part. I know Shelly has been waiting for this with deep breath.
Yeah, well, only because I know you well enough to just be fearful of what these questions might be.
You'll love them,
Okay.
especially this first one.
Okay.
The Michigan ESPN 30 for 30 documentary I would like to be a part of is about this.
Wow, this is, I have to say, the real story of what happened with the Fab Five over time.
That's a good one.
Story about the Fab Five.
I like how you said the real. Basically, Shelly is like, you all have read some things and you saw a 30 for 30, but I'm going to give you the real Fab Five 30 for 30.
Right. Yeah, that would be it. I'd probably make some friends and some enemies, but that would be it.
I would return to Michigan full time for this opportunity. Is there anything that could get you back?
Yeah, actually, especially with the brand new kinesiology building. I keep saying to the dean that, I feel like I should just be able to come and work there for 6 months just to be able to do whatever I want to do now that we're in this fabulous, unbelievable facility that's the premier building on campus. After, I suffered in offices, although I didn't suffer as much as the students who were in classrooms with weights banging on them, and right. So if somebody said to me that I could work in kinesiology and just work in different areas and do whatever I wanted to do and be able to work with students for not indefinitely, but if I could say, and when I'm done, I'm done. I'm kind of very used to my current lifestyle, but instead of scheduling my workouts around my work schedule, which was 6 a.m. and 7 p.m, now my clients and whatever else I'm doing is scheduled around my workouts. I've come to be very fond of doing it that way.
You have one book published. What will be the title of the book about Shelly Kovacs?
Well, the easy answer to that is If These Walls Could Talk. but I don't think I would really. I think so. I just bought a book that somebody told me about, and I can't even remember who it was that told me, but it's called Relationship Education. And it's really about, what I do, the getting into somebody, the way we talked about in the beginning. So if I could really figure out how to teach other people to do that, would be something like that. So the name of it would be I don't know, something like Doing What I Do. Because people say that to me so many times. I've had so many people over the years say, I want to do what you do. Somebody, you even know her, and it's a big joke, so I can say who it is. Melissa Matich said one day we ran into her. I was with my husband, and we were on Main Street right after she came back to town. And she ran right up to my husband, and she said, I want to be your wife. And what she meant was, I want to be, I want to do what your wife is doing. But she said to Harvey, I want to be your wife.
I can imagine Harvey's face. I have it for you, Shelly. Cloning Kovacs.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yes, I like that.
We'll have
See, leave it to the marketer, right? To SW to figure that one out.
There we go. Well, good to see you, Shelly. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you and love you as my Michigan mom, from conferences that you've attended and shared your expertise, coming on this evening and always just being such a big supporter of my work. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I value it so much. Thank you. I do not feel like there is anyone who could have had a better academic advisor than me, even though she called me out when I only missed 2 classes once.
But look what a difference it made, right?
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you so much. And you are the epitome of why I love doing what I'm doing. And the best part of being where I am in my life right now is I get to do things like this with my former students who are now the experts and the professionals and are doing so wonderful. And I'm so proud of you. I just really, I can't even tell you. I talk about you probably at least once a week to somebody.
Well, it is the same on my end as well. I'm already thinking that I need to just schedule a series with you to go over some of the things that we talked about this evening.
Well, I would love that. And I know if it's something you decide to do, we'll do it.
We will do it. Thank you again, Shelly. Love you. And forever, go blue.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you all for joining me this evening. I hope you all enjoyed meeting my Michigan mom. Earlier this week, you met my mother, and now, as we continue our month-long celebration of mothers, you had a chance to meet my Michigan mom. I just adore Shelly and feel so grateful to have her in my life, and I hope that all of you will just reach out and connect with people to form your village and have surrogate moms and dads. It certainly goes a long way to have other people who are championing you and can also help you get better and improve. You know, iron sharpens iron. And that's one thing that I am really grateful for. Shelly has not just been a cheerleader, but as I started this conversation off, you know, she will definitely call you out and nip things in the bud. So, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for next week. We are going to have Miss Janelle Lynch on SheMakers. She is a good friend of mine. She was actually my boss when I worked for Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, and now she is the owner of Executive Doula Agency. So we're going to have a conversation again about motherhood and her work helping businesses create environments for working moms. You know, Wednesday evening is not the only time that you can connect with SheMakers and Hills and Helmets. We are wherever you are. So definitely connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, as well as Facebook. Until next Wednesday, please remember that you are a SheMaker, and I am here to help you unleash your power, make big plays, get in the end zone, and win. Have a great night.